Hello lads and welcome to yet another video. Now, before I get on to the main bit of this video, I've got a couple of things to say first, so if you want to skip this bit and get to the main chunk of what this video is going to consist of, then tough. First port of call, I'm co-hosting a funny little web show thing. It's not on my channel, it's on a channel of my good old friend Bob Corp. It's called Utter Rubbish. It's like a fun little thing. If you've ever seen Twin Joke or Internet Explorers or something like that, it's like that. It's just a fun little thing. Check that out if you like. I'm in it, so that's reason enough for you to just check it out over on Bob Corp. That's that little, obligatory sort of promotion done. Second order, port of call, I now have 800 subscribers. Thanks. It's very not much in the grand scheme of things, but I'm happy. It's a little milestone, and I'm going to look forward to losing some of them with the subject of what this video is going to be about, which I am excited to talk about because it's not really relevant. Well, it's not at all relevant to the sort of current Doctor Who climate, but it's something which I've wanted to get off my chest for a while now because as you're probably guessing from the title of the video, I'm going to be talking about a story which I personally think is criminally underrated so far, that while I think it is a really good story, I've not seen any praise for it. I've just seen people talk about how they don't like it or how they hate it in some cases, and I've seen no solid grounds for it, apart from that it might be slow and it might be boring, but I'm going to direct you to the majority of Classic Who to sort of filter out that argument. It's not exactly my favourite story of New Who, it's not even my favourite story in the series it's in, but I personally have a great admiration for the Rebel Flesh and the Almost People who pass it in Series 6, and I am going to talk about why. As I said, I've seen no sort of solid elements to point why people think this story is so bad. By all means, comment below if you do think the story is bad, why. I'm not going to necessarily argue with you in the comments, but just so I know. But since I've seen no solid arguments, I can't really argue against anything, so I'm just going to go forward and just explain why I like it. First thing, the concept is brilliant. The writer, Matthew Graham, which I was incredibly surprised to find out that the only other story in New Who that he's written is Fear Her, and personally it's a massive step up from that. He's adopted a more serious tone, and he's sort of grounded himself more into a good storyline for Doctor Who. He's finally figured that out, and I'm just ashamed that people have slated for him because it's a massive step up from Fear Her. But that's beside the point. He was presented, as far as I'm aware from what I've seen from behind the scenes in interviews and stuff, he was presented with the sort of theme for identity theft to base this story on. I think Stephen Moffat wanted a couple of episodes that tackles with the deal of identity theft, and now we can relate that to an alien threat. And I think the most obvious route he could have gone for here is shapeshifters, because that's just an easy thing to do. Shapeshifters has been done before on Doctor Who effectively, but it has been done before, and that would have been the easiest route to go forward. And you can see that Matthew Graham probably did arrive at that. That is the first step that you would arrive to when you're presented with the sort of theme of identity theft. But you could see he kept on going. He came to a thought, and then he thought of something better, something which has not been done in Doctor Who before. And I might be wrong, because it probably might have been done in another piece of media, but I can't think of anything where this sort of thing has done this, when it's a sort of flesh. The idea for the Gangers is very original, I think, and you could argue that they have the same sort of role as sort of robots or droids, and maybe even to a start shapeshifters, if you like, in the sort of role that they play within the story as these sort of inferior factory workers that the humans look down upon and sort of treat as the sort of the lower class than them. I think that there's something more to them than that, because while the Ood and stuff were sort of slaves, and you have subservient robots that have appeared in the past, these have something more, because they have something quite literally more human to them in the fact that they are sort of a avatar, a puppet of the human controllers, and they have all their memories, and the separation between human and Ganger is very thing. It adds another layer to these monsters. They are monsters that are misunderstood, and while it has been done to death in Doctor Who, they really put across the fear and the concern and the confusion within the Gangers and their motivations across, and I think that they do it really well. It's not just a creature that's been taken advantage of, it's how we humans see them, a part in a machine, but they have their own identity since they relate to us. It's a really clever concept, and I love the way that it gives them more motivation just to have rights, to have equal rights. It's like the Ood, but taken to a step further when they're fighting, when they're not content with their own sort of subservience. They want their freedom, and that is what they're fighting for. That gives them motivation, and with that sort of motivation, it sort of confuses the audience with who to side with and who to really see who is the true antagonist. Because while we have to relate to the humans and we fear for their lives since we relate to them, we also have to side with the gangers at a certain extent because they are being used as a part machine and they don't want to be treated like that. I think the monsters or the villains or whatever you want to call them, the gangers in this episode, they really make a good sort of highlight for this, and I adore it. Moving on, this episode, or these episodes, this story, I would argue, is one of the scariest in Series 6. I would put it above, like, the sort of imagery in Night Terrors, because you really have some messed up stuff in this, which did frighten me as a kid. You have those signs where Jennifer Lucas's ganger, her arm like stretches out from a toilet cubicle and like smashes a mirror, and then immediately you see her neck elongated, and it's just like a sort of snake just coming out, and you have these like blank dead eyes and this sort of slimy skin, and this thing which you saw as human not 5 seconds ago has turned into this sort of abomination of this sort of uncertainty with their form and their character, which is portrayed onto that. And it's terrifying, and you also have these other images. There's a bit where her jaw unhinges and it just comes down in a scream while she's standing in front of just a sort of mess of former gangers which have melted, and you just see their eyes and mouths just like gaping, merged with each other. In the Almost People, she turns into this absolute sort of grotesque, sort of David Lynchian Cronenberg monster, where it's just like, she's not human anymore, she's deteriorated, she's detached herself from anything from human, she's become this sort of new monster which is chasing them down the halls, and that is the most sort of villainous we see them, and the imagery that goes with that is terrifying. I think that point is another element of what makes the story effective. It's as you gradually see, at least in the first part, you see these gangers sort of try and relate and identify themselves and sort of search for their identities as humans, but as the actual humans deject them and form a sort of antagonist from them, they detach themselves of what is human and they become more monstrous in their imagery and their personality, and they become more killer. And while these started as a villain that could be reasoned with and could be calmed down and there could be a collaboration with them, it is the human characters that denounce that from them, and as a result the monsters sort of force themselves in a way of survival to become more monstrous and villainous and become the thing that we fear itself. They become the enemy because we made them the enemy. That is an excellent point. This story is also noteworthy, especially in the second half, for having two doctors, two of the same doctor in it, which is something which hasn't really been done before. And you see them interact with each other, and while this is just a quirky, there's two 11th Doctors, the fun of the quirkiness of it, I think a really poignant point that comes across is the way that Amy treats the both of them, because she has a sort of idea of which one the real Doctor is, because the real Doctor's shoes has been sort of melted and he has to change shoes, so that's the way that she identifies the separation from them, and it is because of this sort of separation that she segregates the two of them, and she treats one of the Doctors unfairly, and she sort of goes against them. The Ganger Doctor goes against her in, again, a sort of need to live, a want for freedom and their own rights, a want for his own identity, and she lashes out, and that causes more of a separation, and Amy sort of alienates this Ganger Doctor in favour for the Doctor which she thinks is the real one, but it turns out that they'd done the old switcheroo, and the Doctor that she thought was the real one was the Ganger, thus making a point of, sort of separation, and I know this word, prejudice, there we go. Why did it take me so long to figure that? It really makes a point on how we separate people, like, based on visual clues or what we know about them. It is probably the most subtle race metaphor in Doctor Who, of recent Doctor Who anyway, because it becomes political without shoving the politics in your face, a la, the Zygon Du Parter, or, all the others that there are. Now, because I've been talking for quite a while, because I do adore what this story comes up, I just think it's a really effective thing, and chances are you haven't seen it in a long time, so I'd say go forth, go forth and multiply. No, go forward and watch The Almost People in the Rebel Flesh, and just go in with an open eye and a clear mind. Forget what you thought. Don't worry about the fact that it's slow or boring or saturated, which reflects the sort of bleakness of the future and the sort of acidic mind, the location that they're in. Just go forward and just invest in the story and the characters and see how you feel, because I think it has gone under the radar and I think people don't like it for no solid reason. So yeah, I like it. I like The Almost People in the Rebel Flesh, and that's just what I want to say. I wanted to get that off my chest for a long time. There was no real reason for me to, but it's just I'm sharing something which I love for a change, instead of complaining about story elements. So there you go. What do you think? Who cares? I've said my bit, and now I'm gonna go. Bye!